Hi, we're out on the range today, so please bear with gunfire you hear in the background. Now today will be part 3, and hopefully the final part, on what's becoming a series on shooting standard pressure non-plus-P 38 special ammunition through snub-nose revolvers. Now I'm using these short-barreled revolvers because these days when people are carrying a 38 special for concealed carry or personal protection, it's almost always a short barrel, and all of these have 1 7/8 inch barrels. Now, our series started with somebody asking me to do a presentation on Winchester's Train and Defend 38 special ammunition. So that's what we did, and I discovered that the Defend ammunition performed poorly. The hollow points gave almost no expansion. So that led to the question, is there a standard pressure 38 special that when fired from a short-barreled revolver will deliver good performance? And that's what we did in part 2, and we discovered the answer was basically no. None of the hollow points performed very well at all. The one exception was Hornady Critical Defense FTX projectile, like a ballistic tip. That expanded pretty well. And that led to me saying that if you're going to carry standard pressure 38 special in a short-barreled revolver, you might be best served with an old-school 158 grain round-nose lead projectile, perhaps even better, a 158 grain lead semi-Wad Cutter projectile. So today in part 3, that's what we're going to do. Now I'm going to start with this Remington green and white box 38 special 158 grain round-nose lead. Now this ammunition's new, of course, but for all intent and purpose, it's the same ammo your grandpa would have shot out of his 38 special. So let's shoot this stuff and see what kind of performance we get out of it. Now we've got our chronograph set up at 7 yards, and let's see what kind of velocities we get. .670. .640. .690. .641. Now let's go crunch the numbers. Well, we got a mean velocity of 660 feet per second. Now that's 95 feet per second less than the 755 advertised on the box. And there's two main reasons for that. One, various things like ambient temperature, elevation, barometric pressure can affect chronograph results, and chronographs don't always agree with each other. And the other is the test gun they were using had a longer barrel than the 1 7/8 inch barrel I'm using today. But still, 660 feet per second seems like low velocity. But remember, we're using a 158 grain projectile, so that's a fairly heavy projectile by today's standards, so we'd expect a little bit lower velocity. But how does that really translate into effectiveness? Well, let's go to the meat target and see if we can answer that. Now forgive the redundancy, but for those who haven't seen this before, this is the meat target. It's got fresh from the grocer pig ears to simulate skin, beneath that a pork chop pectoral, then pork ribs, a bag of oranges to simulate lung tissue, more pork ribs on the back, 4 layers of t-shirt on the front, 4 on the back, and behind that, as always, the new and improved high-tech fleece bullet stop. And I'll go back 7 yards and I'll shoot this with our grandpa ammo, and let's see what happens. And if we're going to shoot your grandpa's ammo, let's shoot it like he would have shot it. Let's take a closer look. So how'd we do? Well, the bullets went through the ribs on the front, and where they hit ribs, broke them. Did a lot of damage to our bag of oranges, lung tissue. Went through the ribs on the back, and where they hit ribs, broke them. Now, I've found that when I'm shooting hollow point ammunition, if I get proper expansion, regardless of caliber, hollow point bullets are almost always stopped by the t-shirt on the back of the target, or by the first or second layer of fleece. These round-nosed lead bullets went through to the 8th, 9th, 10th layers of fleece. So we're seeing certainly sufficient penetration, arguably too much. Either way, it looks like Grandpa's ammunition did pretty well. Now let me show you a close-up of the projectiles. And there they are, and we only see a little bit of deformation on a couple of them where those bullets hit the ribs. Now what about 158 grain semi-Wad Cutter? Well, these days that configuration of ammunition can be hard to find in a store, but a viewer sent me a box of Buffalo Bore 38 Special 158 grain lead semi-Wad Cutter hollow point ammunition. Now Buffalo Bore ammo has a reputation for being loaded really hot, and I haven't worked with it a lot, but what I have worked with tells me that reputation is very well deserved. but this stuff is labeled standard pressure and has an advertised velocity of 850 feet per second. So we've got the chronograph set up at 7 yards. Let's see what kind of velocity we get. $850. $826. $826. $851. Let's go crunch the numbers. Well, we got a mean velocity of 838 feet per second, which is quite a bit for a 158 grain projectile, and it produced a lot of felt recoil in my very light Smith & Wesson Model 638. But the real question is, at that relatively low velocity, has it met expansion threshold for this particular type of hollow point? Well, bullets are traditionally made of lead. Today most bullets are jacketed, and even when you see a bullet that appears to be lead, it's usually not pure lead. It has other metals added to it to enhance its hardness. Well, this buffalo bore ammunition is labeled on the box, soft lead. And I find that I can make significant marks in it with just my thumbnails, so it is pretty soft, which will enhance its ability to expand at the relatively low velocities we're getting. So let's go back 7 yards, we'll shoot the meat target, and let's see what kind of expansion we get. Well, these put some really impressive holes in the ribs on the front, and where the bullets hit the ribs, shattered them. Did a lot of damage to our grapefruit lung tissue. Went through the ribs on the back, where they hit ribs, broke them. And all 5 of these projectiles were stopped by the T-shirt on the back of the target. Now let's take a close-up look at these. And you can see all of these are expanded very well. And our lead projectiles do have a copper gas check on the back of them. Now there's one more type of ammunition we want to shoot, and that's not a semi-wad cutter, but just a wad cutter. Now let me show you a close-up of what it looks like. Now on your right is the semi-wad cutter bullet we were shooting, and on the left is a wad cutter. It's just a flat-faced projectile that's completely cylindrical like an oil drum. Now these days, 38 Special wad cutters can be difficult to find in the store, so the same viewer sent me a box of these buffalo bore wad cutters. Again, thank you. Now these are 150 grain, and they're also labeled as having a velocity of 850 feet per second. But as the semi-wad cutters were soft lead, these are labeled as hard cast. So when we shoot this meat target, we'll expect to see very little or no deformation of the projectile. So let's shoot from 7 yards and see what happens. Well, with our wad cutters, the bullets went through the ribs on the front, and where they hit the ribs, broke them. Chewed up our grapefruit lung tissue a little bit, went through the ribs on the back, hit a rib, broke it. But I saw some really inconsistent penetration. A couple of the projectiles were stopped by the T-shirt on the back of the target, and a couple of them went through to the 6th layer of fleece. So that was really inconsistent penetration. But as far as effectiveness, they look effective, but not anything stellar. But let me show you a close-up of the projectiles. And we see that our hard cast wad cutters, as expected, had no deformation to speak of at all. So what's the takeaway from all of this? Well, with our 158 grain round nose lead projectile, we saw what seemed to be good performance and good penetration, possibly too much. And when you compare this to the high dollar standard pressure 38 Special hollow points we were using on previous occasions, this definitely gives equal performance, probably better, and does so with a much lower price tag. Now the buffalo bore ammunition, the thing with it is it has 2 big downsides. One, it's quite often not available at your local stores, you have to mail order it, and the other is it can have a pretty high price tag. Now with this semi-wad cutter hollow point ammunition, we're getting a mean velocity of 838 feet per second with a 158 grain projectile out of a 1 7/8 inch barrel. Now I do not know what the PSI of it is, I can't tell you the chamber pressure, but with those kind of numbers, even though this is labeled as standard pressure, I'm thinking it's got to be at the high end of that scale. Now with our Buffalo Bore flat-faced Wad Cutter ammunition, it's got the same downsides, and I saw that the performance looked pretty good, but nothing I'd call outstanding. So, if you're using a .38 Special snub-nose revolver, I would say go with +P ammunition if you can. Now, if you can't because your handgun is not rated for +P ammunition, I am a little bit skeptical of the safety of this Buffalo Bore ammunition in such a gun. Also, if you choose not to use +P because you're trying to avoid recoil, then the Buffalo Bore is definitely not the way to go. But the real bottom line seems to be, if you're going to go with standard pressure ammunition, any one of various types of 158 grain round nose lead projectile are going to be sufficient. And if you're okay with the downsides of Buffalo Bore ammunition and you think it's safe for your handgun, then there's no question that the performance of it was outstanding. So as always, don't try this at home. I'm what you call a professional, and thanks for watching part 3 in our series of standard pressure .38 Special ammo.